Good evening and welcome to the February 18th meeting of the Old Colony Budget Subcommittee. This evening we are joined by many guests from our member towns as we discuss the FY22 budget. We will begin tonight's meeting, which is live streamed on the Old Colony Facebook page, by reading through the roster of those in attendance. If you give me just a brief moment, I will read from our list of participants. I am Aaron Polanski, Superintendent Director. We have Alan Germain from the town of Carver, Darren Beals from the town of Lakeville, Gamache from the town of Mattapoisett, Don Williams from the town of Carver, Gail Rodrigues, town of Acushnet, John Howcroft, town of Acushnet, Jolene Costa, Assistant to the Superintendent Director and Secretary to the Old Colony School Committee, Chris Stoltenberg, town of Rochester, Gary Johnson, town of Mattapoisett, Mike Lorenko, town of Mattapoisett, Mo St. Amand, town of Acushnet, Rich LaCamera, town of Lakeville, Robert Marshall, town of Lakeville, Ron Melbourne, town of Acushnet, Sarah Griffith, Old Colony Business Manager, Shirley Burke, town of Rochester, Suzanne Sindler, town of Rochester, and Chris Stoltenberg, town of Rochester. It is wonderful to see everyone this evening. We thank you for joining us. At this point in time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Marie St. Amand, the chair of our budget subcommittee. Thank you. You're on mute, Mo.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up to this meeting, and welcome to all our guests from all member towns. I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this point, it's going to be quick. I'm going to turn it right over to Sarah so she can give you all the rundown for these sheets that she's already sent out to you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate it. I have to start the meeting by providing the subcommittee with an update because we received communication from the Department of Education this afternoon. We asked the Department of Education regional office for guidance, and they got back to us today in regards to the use of the ESSER2 funds. So their update today was to proceed with the idea that the ESSER2 funds are part of the House 1 budget. Therefore, the funds have not been officially approved as part of the state's budget, but they would like us to proceed with a draft assessment as though they will be approved. So that changes the presentation a little bit tonight, and I just wanted to provide the subcommittee with an update so that they know why the presentation will be a little bit different tonight. Basically, DOE has said, present your assessments without ESSER2, but be ready, because if the budget is passed by the state with the funding and the town and the district choose to use the funding to offset minimum local contribution, they want us to be ready to go with the assessment draft to vote. So that's the start, and it changes the presentation a little bit. Does anyone from the budget subcommittee have any questions at this time about that communication?
I don't have any questions, but one more curveball by the state.
I agree. So we will start with the presentation to the member town finance committee and town administrators. I will share my screen. The first item that we would like to present is the Chapter 70 funding for Old Colony. To be very honest with you all, this was a surprise for Old Colony. We thought that we would receive more state aid for the increase to our foundation enrollment than what we received from the state. Basically, we received the minimum local aid, which you can see down in number 6. The minimum local aid is $30 per pupil. So in essence, level funded with last fiscal year for Chapter 70 revenue for Old Colony. The next page for presentation purposes is the minimum local contribution by town, which was also a big surprise. So we had 2 sort of huge surprises. The first, that our Chapter 70 was really minimally funded, and the second was there was a large increase on minimum local contribution for our member towns, as you can see here, $778,000. So we had that to take a look at that, and the budget subcommittee had put together a draft budget in December that, when we populated our state aid numbers that were released January 27th and our minimum local contribution, I think we all sort of agreed that we had to go back to the drawing board and make some changes to the budget that we were presenting to our member towns this year. The third piece of the pie for Old Colony this year is that we have 3 school choice sending students, 1 in Carver and 2 in Mattapoisett. So just in case people don't know what that means that students residing in your town have chose to attend a Chapter 74 program that Old Colony does not offer in a different town. The way the state assesses this to everyone and takes payment for these students is through our cherry sheet. So it's important because the amount that is shown on page 1 under the amount that Old Colony will receive for Chapter 70 aid isn't actually what we will receive, because per our cherry sheet, DOR will be taking $5,000 per student to pay for those students that are attending Chapter 74 programs in other towns. The purpose of the next page, page 4 in the presentation, was to show our member towns the initial draft budget that we got together with and talked about on December 8th, 10th, something like that, beginning of December. And then the different drafts that we discussed and put together after that in an effort to aid the burden of the minimum local contribution increase of that $778,000, and the fact that Old Colony wasn't receiving any additional state aid on our end. So in doing that, we proposed a cut to our first draft of the budget of about $124,000. The first is to health insurance. We are part of Gateway, which some of our member towns are as well. They are discussing the renewal for next year and have not voted on a renewal for next year. Old Colony also had about 5 staff move over to family plans this last year, whose spouses maybe had lost their jobs, who have gotten married. So that number may decrease slightly, but we also have to be careful about making sure that Old Colony has enough budgeted on the employer side for those family plans that we did not have last year. So currently, it's a 5% increase on last year's actual. Depending on the rate that Gateway renews, that may go down a little bit. The second cut is to supply lines throughout the entire district, every department. It's a little bit from everyone. Comes to about $46,000 in total. The cuts are at the bottom of page 4. And the last cut is to contracted services for special education. This is a line that in the past we have not had to rely heavily on. And the subcommittee presenting this cut is obviously with the understanding that if we have something happen next school year and we have a student with high needs or additional needs, we may need to come back to our appropriation and vote to transfer to the special education line that we're cutting in this proposal. So we brought the proposed draft budget that we discussed in December from $13,004,223 to $12,880,285. That is an overall increase last year to this year of 1.98% in our total budget. The initial request that we had put forward was about 2.98%. So we cut about a percentage off of the total budget increase from FY21 to FY22. For the next sheet, I want to show our member towns what the ESSER calculation looks like broken out. The way that it is written currently on the Chapter 70 guidance page is that it is the town's proportional share of the minimum local contribution. So basically, whatever your proportional share of our current minimum local contribution is, we apply that weight to the ESSER2 funds, and that's how we would come up with the credit to minimum local contribution. That's what the next sheet is.
Sarah, what page was that?
That's on page 5 of the presentation that was sent out. Page 6 and page 7 are where, for the purpose of the conversation tonight, we're going to shift to the scenario where we don't apply the ESSER2 funds yet. And the reason is because of literally the email I got this afternoon at 2 o'clock that said, until the state approves ESSER2 funding in the budget, DOE is proceeding as though they will, but they do not have definitive guidance for regional school districts. Once we receive that from them, that definitive guidance for the regional school district on how we should apply the funding, we will do it that way. That's the plan. So I'm going to shift a little bit to sort of a different presentation. So the last 2 pages of that presentation are the application of the ESSER2 funds. Because we're not sure whether or not they're going to be approved, I'm going to show you the other draft version of the assessments to member towns. The sheet that I'm showing right now is a breakdown of our budget by a roll-up of a DESI sub-function on the classification for Old Colony. So leadership and district administration, instructional services, Other school services include athletics and transportation. So in that number 3, the other services. Then you have your operations and maintenance, fixed charges, asset addition, which is really your capital, and debt service. So I just wanted to show the town administrators and finance committee members the 1.98% increase on last year's budget. And I can send this if you'd like. I just realized in my cloud of DESI finance that I didn't have a breakdown of our budget for you. This is a breakdown of net school spending, other school spending and debt service, the application of our non-resident tuition from Freetown, the application of our remaining funding that will come directly to Old Colony, so our Chapter 70 aid. You can see that offset of the school choice sending tuition. The reason the number 14,910 is being used is because Old Colony received the minimum per pupil. So we received $30 for each one of those 3 students. And in conversations with the budget subcommittee in regards to this assessment and how DESI requires school choice sending students be assessed, is basically DESI tells Old Colony what the Chapter 70 is before the student. They tell Chapter 70 they tell Old Colony what they're going to take from our Chapter 70 for the student, and then they ask us to assess the member town to make the Chapter 70 whole that they took from us. You following? Okay. They give us the Chapter 70 number on our cherry sheet, right? We'll go back here. Right here at the top. They say Old Colony is going to get 3297294 in Chapter 70. And then here, they charge us this tuition. But what they do is they take it off the top before they send us the Chapter 70 payment. So our net receipts are the 3.297 minus the $15,000. But in that 3.297, there's $30 for each student that we're going to get, and we're going to receive that. So in the assessment to the member town, the budget subcommittee discussed taking the $30 out. We don't really need to assess you for something. If we receive the revenue, we don't need to be made whole on it. So that was the idea behind the 14,910. It's basically $30 per student. Our transportation reimbursement aid per the cherry sheet is set at $379,394. If the state approves a higher reimbursement rate, and that is more money, then the assessment to the member town could go down. You know, any funds that we have in transportation reimbursement, we apply to the budget for that fiscal year, following fiscal year. And then we have our voted transportation reimbursement fund, which again is a place for us to hold additional revenue from the state for transportation reimbursement and then use in the subsequent year's budget. So that is basically a restricted revolving account that if it increases, it will decrease our member town assessment. So in the draft version of these, those are some things that could change. That basically brings us to the member town assessment portion. We always start with minimum local contribution, additional local contribution in excess of minimum local contribution. Then you have your transportation and equipment and capital and debt. And then you'll see the assessment for the school choice sending tuition students. This is where When the state clarifies and gives guidance to ESSER2 funding, this assessment will change. So although to have a conversation and to take a look at what the fluctuation would be for your specific member town based on their enrollment of pupils at Old Colony, this is the assessment before ESSER2 funds. When we receive notice and guidance from the state, the handout you received would be the assessment after application of the ESSER2 funds, which as a budget subcommittee was decided that Old Colony would like to use that, and we will proceed when Jesse gives us guidance, however they say to use it. And unfortunately, the timing right now, I have no idea when that guidance will come. If the guidance doesn't come before March 24th, is that a public hearing? We will have to move forward with the assessment without ESSER2 funding. If they issue guidance before, we will update all of our assessment sheets to apply the ESSER2 funding. If we receive
Sarah,
it.
have they given us any indication of when they're going to give us guidance?
No.
They have not. And also, whether or not we get our guidance sooner or later, it does not change the fact that the ESSER2 funds are a one-year offset. And we want to be very clear and transparent about that, because it's very important that we don't take that into consideration when we look at differentials for FY23, right? So that's a really important piece of the plan, and we wanted to make sure that we articulated very transparently that the state has basically said this can be used as a one-time offset, but we don't want to throw anyone for a loop when FY23 has a jump that might look to be more considerable because it's a one-time offset. Does that make sense? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, Sarah. I'll
It's okay.
pass it back.
And what we were told by the Department of Education when we asked them about the increase to minimum local contribution for our member towns is that because so many school-age students left public education, there was a large shift in our member towns' ability to pay. According to the state, our member towns, because the local school districts lost so many public school students, they decided our member towns had the ability to fund the foundation enrollment increase at Old Colony. And Mr. Plansky and I had a very open and honest conversation about how, you know, just because a student leaves public education, it doesn't mean that school is able to reduce their budget, because the students may leave, it's a trickle effect of a few students in every class, let's just say from K to 7th. They leave public education and they go over to a private school or a Catholic school. That doesn't necessarily equal a teacher in that class, or it doesn't correlate directly to a budget decrease. So our conversation with them was, although you have assessed our member towns' ability to pay and increase their minimum local contribution, it's not necessarily apples to apples. So what the budget subcommittee tried to do was to keep our budget increase as close to or less than the total increase to minimum local contribution for our member towns, in an effort to aid the large increase. Unfortunately, going forward, Old Colony will continue to increase the foundation enrollment. That's what Mr. Plansky was just saying. Next year, we're going to start from that 778 because this grant is a one-time grant. But at least it gives our member towns the opportunity to plan for the future. Does anyone have any questions, or Mr. Plansky, if you have anything to add?
Just to add that I know Sarah said we spoke with not only the state, but we also made some calls to legislators just to articulate our concerns, because what we'll see, because we will see a departure of Freetown and an increase in our foundation as a result of the increased population from member districts, that cost will show in assessment, right? Because money follows students. And there's a revenue source that will be depleted over a 4-year period that used to come from the town of Freetown. So it's very important for us to keep that in mind as we proceed. That in addition to the one-time offset of ESSER 2 funds, which came into play. So again, we've made phone calls to both the state and to our legislators to express our concern relative to the funding formula and to see what type of impact we can have through conversation to better assist our member towns. So our advocacy does not stop on the local level. We want you to know that we've moved beyond that. And we wanted to make sure we're sharing that with you.
Does anyone from the budget subcommittee have anything to add?
I can't see anybody's faces, so.
Aw, there you go.
There we go. Thank you.
Sorry.
No. Actually, I don't even see everybody's. My screen ain't that big. Are there any questions from the finance committee members or town members, representatives?
Mr. Chairman, Rich LaCAM, Lakeville. I have a question on the, Sarah, the school choice Chapter 74 programs. I believe you said that a few students, it looks like 3 students, I guess, from member towns went to different Chapter 74 programs. Are they
Yes.
Old Colony students?
They're not Old Colony students, no. So we have one student in Carver. So they reside in Carver.
Yeah.
They're attending a Chapter 74 program in Taunton.
Okay.
There are 2 students in Mattapoisett, reside in Mattapoisett. They're attending Chapter 74 program, the same program actually, in Wareham.
Okay.
That's a program that Old Colony doesn't offer.
No, I understand that, but this is the first time we've seen this though, right?
School choice is much more common in the regional school districts, not so much in the vocational school
Right.
districts. However, I did reach out to other local vocational school districts who have said they've seen a rise among students attending Chapter 74 programs in towns. So for instance, Wareham has a marketing program.
Right. So my question is, not to do with those kids. My question is Bristol Aggie considered a Chapter 74 program?
No.
Bristol Aggie has a separate column, Rich. When you look at your Chapter 70 workup, they have a separate column for Freetown Lakeville, and it shows, I believe it's 10 students are at Bristol Aggie from the Freetown Lakeville district. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's Freetown Lakeville. And then that number, it's either Freetown Lakeville or Acushnet. That number remained 10 in one of those 2 communities. But for you, you'll see an actual column that says Bristol County Agricultural, and it will show you how many students from your from the Freetown Lakeville district are attending. Those may be Freetown students. I'm not sure, because I know Lakeville is not a member at Bristol Aggie and Freetown is. So I'd have to go back and look at your Chapter 70.
No,
Sheet.
the question is with tuition, and I know Rochester's tuition for Bristol Aggie, and I believe Mattapoisett is too, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
You know, we're talking now $27,000 to $28,000 a student, and we have 12 there. And
Yeah.
so that has nothing to do with you guys, but I was just curious to understand the school choice thing.
Yeah, one question on that school choice. So we're paying you, and I understand that, but it's not coming off my cherry sheet then? I'm reimbursing you for what's coming off of you, and that's kind of what it is?
Exactly.
That's fine.
Yes,
Sarah, could you clarify this enrollment issue? What affect that? So people who are teaching at home or whatever this year, so they've taken their kids out. So what exactly is that effect on state aid?
So, there goes the screen again. What we were told is that if the students in your town that are school age students leave the public school system and are either tuition to private school or Catholic school, the state, when they assess the town's
Or
ability to
homeschooled?
pay, or homeschooled, yes, or homeschooled, because you wouldn't receive Chapter 70 for a homeschooled child, exactly. Those students leaving the public school system, according to the state, leaves the town with the availability to fund students coming to Old Colony in a way that it might not have if those students had stayed in the public school system. So what we were told, and given nothing is concrete. We've been given nothing. It's all if, the when, maybe, but if the students in your towns come back to your schools next year and your foundation enrollment at Old Colony increases, Old Colony might get more state aid. If the state does not believe the town has the ability to fund that student's education at Old Colony, because your resources are being used locally for those students that are back in your public school system.
So was there a number put on this amount per student or something?
No, because every town in our district has a different assessed value, different property values, different tax rates. So no, they did not give us a number per pupil.
Because it's a little ironic because the school choice number has been set at 5,000 for over 20 years. And I suspect that the marginal benefit is not nearly, I mean, having a student drop out of the public system isn't going to save a significant amount of money.
No,
I mean, that's, okay, thank you.
no, you're welcome.
So essentially, Desi's considering these kids aren't going to be back there next year. Is that assuming that's what their assumption is?
Sarah, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So, Mike, that was part of our argument when we called Desi. We said, they call it ability to pay. That's how they referred to it. They said basically because Freetown Lakeville saw a decrease in 111 students, they have a greater ability to support the additional students that they will see at Old Colony. I'm using that as an exemplar, right?
Yep.
Acushnet saw a decrease in 85 students. They have a greater ability to pay for the 15 additional students they're going to see at Old Colony. Interestingly enough, we all received $30 per pupil across the board, every single one of us. In terms of different pieces of this puzzle, what we argued, Sarah and I, was you may see of the students, let's say in Rochester, K through 8, who left the district, those 31 students could be spread over all the grades, right? You're not going to let teachers go as a result of that.
Yeah, 100%. They're telling
Right?
me.
And so what we argued was, how are you telling us that they have a greater ability to pay when they still need their resources to fund education in their respective towns.
Yep.
And we carried that conversation to another level with legislators, because I think when you say nothing, nothing happens. If you say something, the worst that can happen is you sing and you miss, right? So we have an obligation as a vocational school that serves 5 member towns to advocate on behalf of our member towns, because this is a partnership. And the idea that it then pits people, right, against one another, instead of creating that continued collaboration, because I'll tell you, I have a great rapport with all of our sending superintendents. We work very collaboratively on a multitude of different things. I'm in regular communication with all of them, you know. So I think it's really important for them to take a deeper look at how this is impacting not only us, but also our municipalities, our regionals, and everybody involved. So the advocacy has taken place. We had lengthy conversations. When Gary, you know, put his hands like this and said, geez, you know, I read signals as well as listen to the things that are being said. We felt the exact same way, Gary. We kind of said, gosh, well, we hear you, but it doesn't really make sense to us, which is why the advocacy is what it is. Now, we also were very clear in our advocacy that we know our foundation is going to continue to grow. We know that. We're no longer in a position where Freetown students are attending. We have huge interest from our member towns in terms of the students that want to attend. And so we expect that over the course of the next 3 years, we will be in a position where we'll continue to see our foundation grow. And that's an important piece of this puzzle as well. And I said to them, there needs to be a breaking point. We have 31 additional students, but what if we had received an additional 100 students? You can't expect us to operate at $30 per pupil additional funding and be able to support those 100 students. So I said something very similar to what Gary said, and my question was, what's the number? Where in the algorithm is there a number that basically acts as a switch, right? Just a binary switch where they go from $30 to here's your additional aid for your additional students because there's a need. And we got no answer. The questions were asked, the answers weren't provided. So we had to go back to the drawing board. We had to move from 2.98, as Sarah said, to 1.98, and really just do the best we can to shave that number down and still be the old colony that we need to be for our students and our families. So we're hoping that we can continue to provide at the same level we have been, because really to do more would result in significant impacts to the education of our kids. And we're trying to avoid that.
Well, I just want to thank you for asking the right questions, because those will be the questions I'm sure all of us have. Because again, my local schools aren't cutting teachers because they don't have these 41 kids. They're expecting the majority of these kids to return next school year. So,
right.
You know, I just applaud you for asking those questions on behalf of us. So.
Absolutely. And those, you know, those were the points we made, Mike. We articulated that kindergarten enrollments are down, but parents are waiting a year. What happens in September when all of these kids, when kindergarten classrooms double in size, right? Because somebody said, you know what, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait to enroll my student because I don't want their first day of kindergarten to be behind a screen. Because kindergarten kids need hugs. And I hate to sound, I hope it doesn't sound silly, but you know what? High school kids need love too. And that's the business we're in. We're in the business of connecting. We're in the business of nurture. We're in the business of building the whole human being. And to move, I said to Sarah, I applaud the effort that took place to get to 1.98. To move beyond 1.98 hurts my heart, to be quite honest. We even looked into what some other high schools were doing to get an accurate picture of whether or not the 1.98 is reasonable. And we felt as though at 1.98, we felt we were presenting a responsible and fiscally sound budget.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
If I could, it appears to me, and I keep coming back to this point, meeting after meeting after meeting, it appears to me that the state is making budgetary decisions based on solving their budget problems and not paying a great deal of attention to the impact that it's going to have on ours. And I assume it's probably true for many other schools, districts as well. That bothers me a great deal, as I'm sure it does everybody else. And, I'm wondering if it would be of any benefit to complain loudly and long to our legislators or whomever else.
Bob, I will say we did make some calls. We did have some meetings to that tune. There were 42 schools in the state of Massachusetts that saw increases in foundation enrollment. Of the 42 schools, there were 4 schools that saw an increase in their foundation enrollment of over 5%. We're one of those 4 schools. Our foundation enrollment increased by 6.6%. So as we brought our concern to the table, we even went into the cherry sheets and created our own columns to show statistically what the impacts of something like this are. Because you can't just look at numbers that are handed to you. You have to delve deeper into that information and create the point necessary to advocate in an appropriate manner. And what we're seeing is huge growth, to be quite frank, in the vocational schools right now because of the hands-on and in-person learning opportunities. The 4 schools that saw the greatest growth were Minuteman, who just built a new building. They had a huge jump in enrollment of 20%. Franklin County Tech in Western Massachusetts saw a 10% increase. They added an agricultural vet tech program, and Southeastern and Old Colony were right around 7%. So of the 42 schools that saw increases, the 4 at the top were all vocational schools. And again, we're trying to run the show to the best of our ability, but the minimum aid was not a help.
And I presume when you brought these points up, you didn't get much of a satisfactory answer?
I was very pleased, but there's nothing that can be done with any level of immediacy, and we have to keep that in mind, right? So we have an eye on the future. I think the seed has been planted in a very appropriate, constructive, and collaborative manner. And I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. And I think in the short term, we had an obligation to bring our budget down by that 1%, which is what we did. I think we made the appropriate decisions and made the cuts in the appropriate places, but we'll await word moving forward and keep our fingers crossed.
Aaron,
Yes.
how many kids applied that didn't get in this year?
This year, we have not yet notified students of their acceptance to Old Colony, but I can tell you that our member applications last year were record-setting, and that this year we've already surpassed that number.
So can we talk a little bit about the hidden elephant that's in the room?
What's that?
Which is going to be expanding the school? Are we going
Oh, I don't think it's, Alan, I don't think that's hidden at all. I think that's probably wide open, but our hope is, and I wrote a letter to our member towns just to let them know and keep them in the loop. We submitted a statement of interest last April.
We just got, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
We met with, and I think many of you were at the meeting we had on December 5th, 2019, when we talked about this possibility. We had another meeting when we talked about the Freetown interest in joining and where we made mention of the statement of interest. We have been moved forward in that process to what they call a senior study. The senior study consists of 2 different elements. We moved from 71 potential requests within the state to 30 schools. So the pool is at 30. That does not mean we've been invited into an eligibility process. It means we're at the phase before that. So I don't want anyone to be panicked at this point. I just want to share the information. We want to keep people informed every step of the way, which is why I sent the senior study consisted of a meeting with myself, Sarah, our principal, our chairperson, Mrs. Burke, and facilities director, where they gathered information. The next phase of that senior study will be a walkthrough of Old Colony, where they'll assess the condition of the existing building and get a better grasp of what is necessitated in terms of a project. And they will make a recommendation that we're either not invited in, or that we're invited in with a recommendation for expansion of some sort. Their recommendation would then be brought to our member towns for further discussion. And so once we hear back from them, which we expect will happen within the next month or two, we'll be reaching out to our member towns to provide an update as to where we stand in the status of that particular project. But I appreciate you bringing it up, Alan. I think it really offers the potential for some great updates. It would bring us into the 21st century. I need to hand it to our facilities staff. They do an incredible job of taking care of the building, but I would equate it, I've said this in an earlier meeting, when you see a really healthy person on the outside who then has cardiac arrest. The building looks great, but there are pieces on the internal structure that need a lot of TLC, and it's only because of the age of the facility. So we await word from them. We're cautiously optimistic. I can tell you that I've reached out to Cape Cod Tech. That's in the midst of a project right now. They're wrapping that up. And their project was approximately $130 million. That was for a new building, construction of a new building.
And that was the thought, was to add a second building on the campus so that we didn't have to update the original one?
They'll provide us with more guidance, because we're certainly not the experts as it pertains to the existing structure. So when they walk through, they'll make some recommendations, because their team consists of architects, folks within the construction realm, and people who are very familiar with building projects. So their recommendations would certainly guide decision-making and further communication with our towns.
There's no question that we want to see, I use the term we, and also I'll speak for our own committee, but we definitely are behind Old Colony and what they do. And I like the program. I mean, I got all my 5 graduates from here, so I guess I'm a little biased, but you know.
Oh, we appreciate the continued support. I think the other pieces that we're contemplating is when you add something like a vet tech program, like Franklin County did, it alleviates some of the strain on towns like Lakeville and Mattapoisett and Rochester when that option is available in a more local member-based structure, right? And I remember when I was the principal at Bristol Aggie, and I would hear about the bills that Rochester would receive for a student who might be studying animal science at Bristol Aggie, and it's considerable. So, you know, to be able to do something at a local level can sometimes alleviate some of the financial burden for our member towns if a student may take interest there. So we're also exploring what Chapter 74 program expansion could look like, because that's an important consideration as you expand the blueprint and potential enrollment for the school.
On a different
They're all
note,
tied together.
on a different note, Sarah, you did an awesome job. As usual, you answered every question in your presentation that I had, so I didn't have to ask them. So you were one step ahead the whole time, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
From a budgetary standpoint, from my viewpoint, and just bear in mind, I'm a dummy, so I don't see this budget out of control at all. I see minimum growth in it. I see it very much under control. I was actually pleasantly surprised at just under 14,000 per pupil for us this year. And even if the other way goes, it's 14,125. That's still incredibly low compared to our own town. So I'm extraordinarily happy with the way this worked out.
That's great feedback. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your hard work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman Lakeville. as you know, I support Old Colony, and I've supported Old Colony for years. And we certainly encourage the number of students, to go there, and I think it's important. But unfortunately, the increases, and this has nothing to do with the 1.9% increase in the budget. Okay, it's a reasonable request. But when you talk about the assessment of variance because of the minimum contribution requirements, which in our case is about $281,000. 9 students, you're talking almost $30,000 a student, and this has nothing to do with Old Colony. The problem that we have is that if Old Colony, we have $1 million to spend over last year. That's the bottom line. And with Old Colony potentially asking for the 281, our regional school district, Freetown Lakeville, is asking for 985, which isn't going to happen. And we got these big increase in Bristol Aggie for 12 students that we have at Bristol Aggie. The schools alone are asking for $1,338,000. And even if we said, okay, we're going to fund the Old Colony, we're going to reduce Freetown Lakeville to $500,000, and the Bristol Aggie, that's $852,000. That only leaves $150,000 for the town. So it's pretty impossible, for us, overall. And this has nothing to do with Old Colony, to support a budget increase of this amount. So I just want to be upfront with you now, because we just can't do it. So.
I think the important question is what number is feasible for Lakeville, because while it's important for us to hear that and at least have an idea, and whether we can get there or not, we don't know, but to at least have an idea helps to inform our practice and our thought process. Again, I'm not making promises, I'm just engaging in dialogue, because it's one thing to say that we're unable to do it. It's another thing for us to have a better idea of what is possible, because we can't hit a target we don't see. And that's an important piece for us to always operate by, is if we have a target that we can see, we can certainly juggle, but I think in order to juggle, we need to be able to know what that target looks like. And I don't know if that's the conversation for now or a later time. I just throw it out there because I think in planning, it's a really important conversation. And I certainly respect the strain that a change in assessment brings to towns, which is, again, there was a lot we did not anticipate. I would have never thought that the state would have told us we're going to get $30 per pupil. When I saw that number, my jaw dropped and my heart sunk in my chest.
I don't disagree with you, Aaron. We've been fighting this for a while. It's not just you guys. I mean, it's the same at ORR. It's the same at Freetown, Lakeville. I can't speak for Acushnet and Carver, but that's been a problem because they've only been getting $30 a student too for the last couple of years. I mean, it's just impossible, to try to maintain what you got based on that, and asking the towns, to pick up that difference. But like you said right up front, having to do with the minimum contribution on the foundation budget is, hurting badly, especially, Acushnet, Lakeville, and Mattapoisett. I mean, those are some pretty big increases, and we certainly don't have any control over that. But at the same time, we don't see increases in state aid at the Freetown Lakeville side that's offsetting, this kind of an increase. So they're in the same situation, $30 a student. So it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult. So that's just.
I believe, that's also one reason why we're looking at the grant to help you guys out. Other than that, I know Acushnet's assessment was over 300,000 originally. Now it's at 267 with the grant.
Correct.
Where Sarah, you got those numbers without the grant?
Yeah, she presented.
You'll see what we're fighting against. And we're trying to help you. They did. Sarah, Aaron, and Mike Pocket did a lot of work looking into that grant and trying to find out what it covered, what it made, how long it was for, and trying to get the foot in the door on that one in order to help out our member towns. It's not, I mean, it's helping us all out. That's the way the numbers work.
No, I understand. I understand how the numbers are working. Okay,
Right.
I'm just saying, Aaron pointed this out right up front. You know,
Yes.
the conversation that he had with Department of Ed, the conversation he's had with state reps. I mean, he's absolutely right. You know, this has happened before. This is not a
But we've been in, like I said, we're the budget subcommittee, and we're sitting there, and I think all our jaws dropped when they told us. Sarah started her presentation to us on the first meeting, and it was like,
right.
Okay, what? Yeah.
But I go, I go back to, and maybe we can touch base at a different time, but I go back to what is manageable, because advocacy has to be based in specific targets. And I think the more we can wrap our heads around it together, the better job I can do advocating on behalf of all of our member towns. And that's a really important piece of the puzzle. So I just offer that. I think, I'll continue to advocate, and we'll see where we end up.
Okay.
Aaron, if I could, Rich, can I ask you, if we're allowed, if the ESSA monies become available and we apply it as we hope to, is the assessment with the ESSA 2 funds more, well, I know obviously it's more palatable to you, but is it a number you can work with?
I'll answer that question. I think it is. I answer that question. The Freetown Lakeville is having their meeting next Wednesday night, and I have no idea what they're going to do. And so we have to figure that out. So,
do you have an idea at this point what their budget is increasing, what the request is?
$185,000 more than last year.
But I don't know what
our assessment.
The assessment.
Yeah.
And what percentage increases that to the budget?
It's about a 4%.
Okay. So you're looking at a significantly lower budget request increase. I know you don't have a tree in the backyard of Town Hall, but you think that the application of ESSER, we might be able to work with that, if that's around the dollar figure.
Yes.
Can we hear from the other towns, please? Because, and I'm sorry to ask this question, it's through the chair. We're at a point on the school committee that we will need to be voting something next month for the town of Carver, so that we can start taking some actions. As Sarah said, a public hearing, which will be at the end of March. And I'm not sure that the state will have everything. It has been incredible as I have watched Sarah and Aaron since the release of the governor's budget, and we saw the Chapter 70 monies, and then we saw the ESSA monies, is it or isn't it, and the increases to minimum local contributions. It has been a moving target almost daily. And I think, with all due respect to everyone here, the administration at Old Colony has worked hard to present a budget that doesn't show significant increases. And I appreciate where all of you are. I served, serving time does not do it justice. I was proud to be a member of Rochester's FinCom. I know it's difficult to take what we're giving you and fold it under the umbrella of the full town, but we still need to be able to come up with some form of a budget. So I'd love to hear from Rochester, from Mattapoisett, from Acushnet, with what your thoughts are with what we're presenting.
Mr. Chair, Rich LaCamera, Lakeville, I have another Zoom meeting at 7 o'clock, so I'm going to have to be leaving, just so you know. So I don't want you to think I left for a reason.
Rich, before you go, I appreciate the feedback about the ESSA 2, perhaps being the difference that needs to be made. So thank you. That's helpful to us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I mean, I'll go from Mattapoisett. I'll just tell you, I've had the conversation with Rich earlier about the Bristol Aggie situation. I talked with Suzanne and the town of Marion, not that they're part of this, but about ORs. I just, again, I can't applaud you guys enough as Old Colony to have the foresight, with a cut on the state side to acknowledge the fact that the member towns are sort of already struggling to cut the budget. To me, I'm pretty sure I could go to my board and figure out how to balance the budget if everyone else came in under 2%. That just isn't the case. And, I understand what Richard's saying. My problem to me is my local school and RR, they're not doing the same thing. They're living, the problem I feel is on the state side, they're believing, that these kids aren't coming back. My regional school and my local school aren't cutting teachers. They're not making that cut. They're expecting those kids to be back there in September. So there's miscommunication to me on what the town's expectations are, the schools, on what I'm paying for, because I'm paying for full staff, a level staff with the expectation those kids are coming back. But Richard's right. If I add up what I have for every school right now, I have zero. I have essentially, a couple $100,000, maybe 200, 150 to do everything else in the town. But I'll be honest with you, with what you're presenting, I don't think Old Colony is the one I'm going to be pointing the finger at. It's that's not the percentage increase I have with my other school districts. And like I said, I think, the argument needs to be made there. If that 41 kids or whatever doesn't come back, cuts need to be made on that side appropriately, not on the Old Colony side.
Thank you.
Helpful, Mike. Thank you.
Rochester,
Okay.
what about you guys?
Okay. No, I actually like to pretty much say the same thing that Mattapoisett just said, Mike Lorenko. You did a great job putting together this budget. It's unfortunate that the state again is leaving us hanging here with the SR2 funds. That's I don't know. They're doing a lot of that lately on a lot of aspects, but we won't go there. But on my end in Rochester, what I'm having difficulty with is because we have 13 kids that are going to Bristol Aggie this year, and they have put this debt payment on the towns of almost, right, I have the budget almost $6,000 per student for this additional debt payment that we don't agree with, because we're not a member town. We are a non-resident tuition sending, town where I don't understand. I have to put aside almost $80,000 for this. Right now, I have a budget shortfall of $123,000, and 80 of it is because of Bristol Aggie. So the rest of it, I think I could balance. And obviously, Old Colony's budget, this is a fiscally responsible budget. I'm okay with this. Yep. I appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christian?
John or Ron, any comments?
I don't have all the town's finances in front of me at the moment, but I guess my general feeling is the same as what was just been discussed. Is Old Colony's budget, it's a manageable increase. It's 1.8 or 9%. It's not asking too much by any means, and the gripe is with the state, with the formulation. And I wouldn't want to take away from the kids. We're sending a lot of kids to Old Colony. I want them to have the education they deserve. We were under a lot of pressure. I know that we're struggling to figure out how we're going to, make it all work. I think we will, of course, but I don't think again, the gripe isn't here. I don't have a good solution, for this one. I can't ask Aaron to cut the budget more for this. It doesn't feel right. So I don't know how you feel, John or Gail, if you guys have any other more thoughts on that.
Ron, I just totally agree with everything you've said. We haven't seen all the figures yet. We got to get put on a spreadsheet maybe, but again, it's a highly responsible budget that I've seen here. We're very fortunate that we've increased our number of students to Old Colony, so that's a good thing. So I think we just gotta start looking at all the spreadsheets and make some priority type of sentiments known.
Mhm.
Did everybody hear me, by the way?
Is the question having a meeting, Charlie, Finance Committee? Ron, do you guys know when the next meeting is? You're both muted, so I don't know if anybody.
No, I know the selectmen are meeting Tuesday at 4:00 in Acushnet. I'm not sure when the next FinCom is.
Yeah.
FinCom's the 24th.
Okay, so the following day.
Okay. Thank you, Gail. I didn't even realize you were from a question at first. I'm trying to read the names. I know John.
Our sons were best buddies when they were young. Lee Rodericks
Oh, okay.
was friends with Matt.
Yes, yes.
Carver's gonna get you guys on our budget. We have a budget meeting the 22nd and another one on the 1st. So we're gonna put you guys on the 1st. But usually we don't have an issue with this. We have no control over the school budget, of course, and they're their own country. So, until we can get, I don't know, this is what I see. I see the state driving their Model A Ford and everybody else is running around in a Tesla. So this is where this $30 a student is an insult. It's ridiculous. I just don't get it. And everybody's getting squeezed. Carver's nowhere near as, I'm looking at the sheet here. If our numbers came back looking like Lakeville and Mattapoisett, we'd have people jumping off the roof of Town Hall because these numbers are just, they're high. So something is going to somewhere along the line, the glass only holds so much water. And then it gets to a point where it's now all over the counter and residents sit back and say, well, what do you want from us? So and I've said this about our own finance department and Town Hall, and you guys do it too, especially Old Colony, is you guys all do a tap dance on the head of a pin. You try to make this work. And for the most part, you do. But the surrounding cities and towns this last year have been devastated. Carver's revenue has been surprisingly not as bad as we thought it was going to be, especially with Edaville being shut down and with King Richard's Fair being shut down. We lost a ton of money in meals tax, and it's incalculable how much money was lost in people coming out of these two functions and maybe buying gas or going and buying something in town or whatever the case was. You'll never know that number. The fact that we're all still here is a miracle in itself, I think. So hats off to everybody that's still surviving, but this has been ridiculous. And it's I don't see it getting any easier anytime sooner. We're all worried about what's going to happen April 15th if the governor doesn't acquiesce and allow Edaville, which will have been closed now for 12, 14, 16 months, to reopen. And I don't know how a business stays in business when they're closed for 16 months. So, we don't know what's going to happen this year. The school budget is up. The town budget got level funded. We had a little bit of money set into our capital and debt stabilization fund that we're doing with some capital projects that had to happen. Pretty much stuff that has come to, this has to be done now. The wish lists are out the window, and this is where we're at with it. And I look at this budget here, and again, I got to thank Aaron and Sarah and Jolene. This is a great, from our standpoint, I don't see this as being an issue at all. I have far bigger fish to fry in town than I have in Rochester.
I have a question about the federal impact money that's working its way through Congress now. And whether, how would, how would you be affected? And so I'm watching closely. I don't know if it's a false hope or something that will bear some good fruition, so to speak.
My apologies, John. You were breaking up on my end. I don't know if it's my internet, but I had a hard time understanding what you were asking.
Yeah, I've had the same problem, Aaron.
Can you hear me now?
If we turn off our cameras, we may.
It's almost like he's lost his signal and he's working off a cell signal now.
If we all turn off our cameras, we may be able to hear the commissioner sometimes does this. So if we turn off our cameras, we may be able to hear him. Let's just try it.
You hear me now?
Yeah, try now. Now ask your question, John. Oh, you're on mute though. You're on mute, so turn off your.
How's that?
John, you're on mute.
Now I can hear you.
Now you can hear me now?
Yeah.
About the federal impact money that's working its way through Congress, and whether, whether it's how it's going to impact us, if any, if at all. So stay tuned on that one. I don't know how it would apply to the straits that we're all in right now.
Right. Sure. Yeah. I mean, we're hoping for some type of support that will result from our advocacy. We don't know what that will look like or if anything will happen this year. But again, we certainly refuse to sit silently by. We have an obligation to advocate on your behalf. And when I say your, I mean the 5 towns that we partner with. So we'll continue to do just that. And, I think that if we're successful, I'll be quite proud that we took the initiative to do so. And if we're unsuccessful, I remain proud that we took the initiative to do so. But I hope that you will bear the fruits of our efforts as a 5-member partnership, because it's the most we could do. So stay tuned. We'll keep our fingers crossed. I always say better late than never. And, we thank everybody for their partnership.
As soon as guidance is released from DESE and DOR in regards to this ESSER2 funding and how to apply it appropriately to assessment, we will reach out to everyone and let them know, because the budget subcommittee does have full intention of using that funding to offset the minimum local contribution. So I just want to make sure that that's made clear to everyone, tonight.
Mr. Chairman and everybody, an issue that's sort of been long burning is coming to a bit of a head now, even more of a head, is the schedule where we get the information being pushed up against the dates of the town meetings. Now, Lakeville generally has theirs the first week in June or thereabouts. Apparently, they've gone to May 10th, I think. And this would only have a marginal effect on any of this, but it certainly would give us a little bit more time. I think we all agree that it's unfair in the extreme that the state makes all of their decisions at the last minute. We used to get the cherry sheet figures, pretty much firmly the end of January, early February, and now everything keeps getting pushed back, and I say, that's mostly Sarah and Aaron, have to jump through hoops to get everything done in a timely fashion, because we as a school committee have to make a decision by the end of March. So maybe when further discussions take place with legislators, et cetera, this is one issue that we could bring up, that it's not going to give any immediate solution, but going forward, it certainly would help us not to be squeezed into that shorter time frame. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? I think
we do need a game plan for moving forward because the school committee is meeting on March 17th. So I don't know if we need to meet with our town officials again, you know, after you've had your discussions with your finance committees. But the time frame for the school committee, I mean, we're talking about a month away that we need to make a vote, and we need to know with some semblance what your thoughts are. Can we move forward with the budget we've presented to you tonight? Hopefully by the 17th, the state will have guidance that you can rely on that will tell us what we can do with the ESSER funds. If not, I know that that's another bridge we'll have to climb over somehow. But how can we move forward as a school committee so that we can take action in time for Carver's meetings? Do you need, you know, should we go ahead with this, or do you want to present it to your FinCom and set another meeting?
Set another meeting, or like last year we did it. We had everybody they got back to Sarah with their feelings.
However, but
as long as, you know, I guess that's as long as everything goes smoothly on their end. You know, there could be questions there, but we may still have to pull another meeting.
Well, the best that Carver is going to do is on the 1st. I couldn't get it on the agenda for Monday now if I needed to. So, but I'll have it on for the 1st, and I don't see this being an issue with Carver. What's the meeting with Carver for, Shirley? This is something I don't know about.
What do you mean the meeting with Carver? No, it's on the 17th. It's the school committee, who will take the initial vote to approve next year's budget.
Okay.
So that's on the 17th because you're the first town meeting.
Yeah, ours is the 13th. I was 12th to 13th of April. It's early this year, actually. They've scheduled it a little bit earlier. I think it's the 13th is a Tuesday. We'll have it. FinCom will take it up on the 1st. So I'll shoot Sarah an email when I get home that night from the meeting, or Tuesday morning first thing, and let you know what the outcome was. But I anticipate it'll be like it always is. I think it'll be fun. I don't see a problem with it.
Alan, I did talk to Rick last week. I know that they typically build 5% in Carver. This is a little bit over that 5% increase, but hopefully it won't be so much so that it would be too difficult to manage.
I don't think it's going to be a problem, man.
That's great. Thanks.
So can we do the same thing then, as Mo said we did last year, that people can reach out to Sarah
Sure.
with any issues?
Early in the month, you know, the 1st, the 2nd, you know, if your meeting's on the 1st. But the first week we need something, because if we have to set up another meeting with all you folks, it's going to be before the 17th. And see, you know, from there. But
well, Sarah will know about ours on the 2nd, so that takes care of.
Mattapoise's FinCom's meeting on the 4th, right, Gary? That's the next meeting for us. Yeah. So our percentage increase is massive for Mattapoise. I understand that, but again, if I'm with Alan on this, you know, I believe you guys did your job to get a reasonable budget that's fiscally conservative. It's my job to figure out capacity and balancing the total town budget. You know, I don't know what the FinCom's going to say. If you want to present on the 4th, I would say that would be reasonable. But right now, you know, if I had to make a decision, you know, I would tell you this is a pretty conservative budget. I don't think you're going to get much pushback, even though our increase is pretty massive as a town.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
I'd agree. I think, given the fact that we've got the additional students, I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
So,
This is Darren from Lakeville. I'll follow up with Rich next week and we'll get back to Sarah. From my perspective, it seems reasonable. I think Rich I don't want to speak for Rich, but he's looking at it from a town perspective, right? He just sees one big number and he's trying to manage that. But we'll talk about it next week and we'll get back to Sarah. And thank you for all your
Thank you.
work.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Anybody? Okay, if that should do it. Pretty much. I think we got everybody's input.
I think we're good.
All right. I just want to thank Sarah for her work on this, and I'd like to thank everybody for their continued support and partnership. We really appreciate the ongoing dialogue. We're a phone call away if you need us, and we always have you guys on speed dial should we need to speak with you. So thank you again, and we look forward to talking with everyone soon.
And one more thing, Aaron, for the record, because this is Zoom, when we finally all get together in person, it's double cookies. It's better stuff out of the kitchen. So just that's got to be for the record. Maybe it should be a meal.
That's Jolene.
Hey, Alan, Jolene you talk about food and Jolene turned the camera on.
I saw that. We didn't see Jolene until I mentioned cookies, and then that camera came right back to life.
If that's not a sign, I don't know what is, but that means there's food in our future. We'll take care of it.
Thank
So
you,
good to see
everyone.
everybody.
Thank
Good
you
night,
for your
everyone.
time.
Good night, everybody.
I've asked Jolene to stop by my house on her